Let's talk about functional writing. Specifically, let's talk about Harebrained Schemes. This is a group of devs that produced a couple of Shadowrun games like Shadowrun Dragonfall and Shadowrun Returns, and they also produced Battletech. And by produced, I mean they actually made those games. So they specialized in map-based games where you shoot people, and that's, a pretty typical setup. The games are generally well regarded, and I enjoyed them quite a bit. But I didn't enjoy them for the gameplay. The gameplay was decent, I guess, but what I really enjoyed them for was the functional writing. The term functional writing means something different depending on what media you're in. Functional writing for an academic essay is obviously different than functional writing for a movie. And in a video game, the function in question is gameplay. So functional writing exists to shunt you into gameplay. And this is how they used it. Every single time you have some sort of scene, some sort of discussion in one of these games, there would be some element of a call to action. Something that after you're done with the conversation, there's something to do. Maybe there's a new map you can go to. Maybe there's a fetch quest. Maybe a part of the map is now open that was closed before. Maybe someone can now level up. This is a very basic structure, and it's a very powerful structure because it lets you write a game. A lot of indie devs write a book and then staple a game to it. But if you use functional writing, you're never going to have that problem because literally everything you ever write is entirely focused on making sure the player gets to the next gameplay element and enjoys it. And it's really that second part that's the challenge. How do you get them to the next gameplay element? That's easy enough. How do you make them enjoy that next gameplay element as much as possible using your writing? And this is where Harebrained was excellent. This is where Harebrained really shone, in my opinion. And you can see them evolve this over the course of their career. So in the very first Shadowrun game they made, which was Shadowrun Returns, there's actually no double dots there, it's just SR. This is one of their early games, and they do use functional writing very aggressively. And it works. The game as it is now is very smooth. You play through it, and you never feel like you're stuck or disenfranchised or annoyed. It just flows, and the writing is a big part of that. This is obviously a little different from how it was when it first came out, but it's good. The downside is that the writing lacks any emotionality or character beats worth noting. It's a very, very functional, like bare bones approach to writing. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not purple. I mean, you'd get these pictures of these characters like, oh, look, you found an elf. And then over on the sidebar it would say, the elf is, and then 10 lines of description of the elf. Yeah, we can see the elf there, right there. You don't have to keep describing them to us. And then the elf would say something like, let's fight, and you'd fight. So that's a sort of thing that you find in the first game. It's not emotionally powerful, but it always keeps things rolling. And pretty much you can ignore the descriptive text and just go for it. Now with the next game, Dragonfall, they started to take writing a little bit more seriously, and so they started to write more like they were producing Dragon Age or something similar. You got a set of characters, and they were your main party members. And, you talk to them, and you get to know their tragic backstories. It's always tragic backstories. That's the only kind of backstory anybody writes. And then, you have a stable party throughout the whole game, basically. However, they kind of screwed up the functional part on Dragonfall, and this was a little bit of a shame. It made it hard for me to play the game because it felt like very jerky, herky-jerky, start and go, start and stop, start and start. And it was partly due to the fact that they weren't focusing on the functional writing as much, so in many cases the call to action would be really pretty weak. But in other cases, the problem was the structure of the game itself. Dragonfall slightly tweaked how fights start. See, in the first game, fights start in a lot of different ways and at a lot of different ranges, and in Dragonfall, that's just not the case. In Dragonfall, every single fight starts with you either opening a door and standing in the doorway going, I'm here! Kill me! Or you going around an L bend, standing in the corridor and going, I'm here! kill me, kill me. And of course, you get shot at and killed. So this is a mandatory you failed basic shadow running encounter. For some reason, your experienced, stealthy, super ninja characters don't know how to not walk into every single fight and get ambushed. Now, eventually, once you play the game for long enough, you'll learn a couple of tricks, like you jump out into the corridor going, hey, kill me, and then you immediately run away. And then the fight can start by them trailing around the corner and stuff like that. But every single fight feels cheap, and it feels like you aren't Shadowrunners, you're just fools walking into endless ambushes. And for me, this actually made it hard to do functional writing, because you can't give me a call to action, a call to gameplay that I enjoy, because I know that every single gameplay that isn't just, a fetch quest, anything that involves a fight, the fight is going to start by me being a complete idiot and walking into at least one ambush. Over and over and over. And that didn't feel like such a problem in the first game, but it sure was in the second game, and it really hampered my enjoyment. Now, when it comes to their magnum opus, Battletech, this is when I think they really got things down, because at this point, they had both the writing and the gameplay in concert. In Battletech, you do occasionally get ambushed, but if you do, it's specifically part of what they intended the writing to do, right? So in Battletech, you get those writing beats, and then you start on a map, and you get a lot of free reign as to how you approach things and how you move through these challenges. It feels very smooth and very easy to understand, so you don't ever feel like you have to be incompetent in order to play the game. They never ruin the fantasy of being competent Battletech pilots. Instead, every single time they write a beat, the objective they give you leads you into gameplay that reinforces whatever kind of tone they were writing for. If they wrote about how you're going to be a badass, then when the map starts, you are a badass. If they wrote how you're in trouble, then when the map starts, you're in trouble. And that really helps, because it allows you to write a wide variety of calls to action. Whereas with Dragonfall, you don't really have a wide variety of call to actions, because every single fight starts with you getting just totally boned in the same way. But in Battletech, that's not the case. They have a million different ways to bone you. So it was a lot of fun to see this evolve. And it's important to note that this isn't pure writing. A lot of it does have a more visual element, audio element, things that aren't just pure words. So in Battletech especially, that was a big part of the draw. Battletech uses these really beautiful, elaborate, full-screen animations of characters doing cool stuff and looking cool as the background burns or whatever. And it really helped to make the game hit hard. It sold the fantasy. It drew you in really, really well. So all combined, Battletech really nailed this idea, this functional idea to me. They definitely wrote everything to always pull you into the next element, give you a new objective, a new call to action. Everything was still written like that. But they had refined the process enough that they understood what they could tell you to do, and also understood how they could really sell it. So you would always get, someone's angry, someone's seeing cool visuals, there's an explosion, something's happening. Something really neat to pull you into the scenery, pull you into the conflict. And of course, the Shadowrun games were short on budget. They didn't have much in the way of cutscenes. So when they tried to do this, it would just be like a 10-pixel high guy walking onto the screen and going, "Mwahaha, I'm ambushing you." And you going, "Yes, every single fight I've ever been in has been an ambush." And he's like, "Well, this one is intended to be. I'm going to run away now." And you're like, "No, I'm going to shoot you." And he dies. So compare that to the giant scenes of exploding spaceships in orbiting a planet and getting a phone call from a dead AI and stuff like that. You can really see that Battletech allowed them to stretch their wings. It allowed them to really push how they could write things. At the heart, everything is written in the same way as it was in the original Shadowrun game, where every single beat takes you to some kind of objective. But in Battletech, they widened the kinds of objectives, and they really made the writing hit so much harder so that you cared more about the objectives. So this is just a basic tip. If you are trying to write a video game, remember that it's a video game. You have to sell what the player is going to do next. Whatever ability you have to do that, whether it's, something limited by your budget so you can only show a 10 pixel high character, or whether you can do vast movie style sequences, you always want to make sure that you're focused on making the player look forward to the next bit of actual gameplay. Because that's the spice. If the player wants to do the next bit of gameplay, even if the gameplay is not gold, the player will still really love it. At least in my opinion. That's it. Have a good one.